Hello, adventure enthusiasts! Here are some vintage training videos EBO produced in the late 1990s. These videos actually helped get us blacklisted from a leading trade association. After all, training was reserved for only certain approved vendors, right? Ha ha ha! Fast forward to present day, where the coronavirus has shut down our industry. Every vendor seems to be clamoring for a virtual presence and is creating training content in this new era of online learning. So we thought it about time to blow off the digital dust and make these videos available once again. Enjoy!
Okay, and then to do a close-up of the other harness you saw, this one as well with the pre-sewn buckles that just pull the cinch and you back them off to loosen. Again, I want to get the tension. Again, kind of tough to get two fingers between the webbing and the person's side. Again, up above the hip bone. And in this case, if I have a lot of extra tail, I might even go ahead and just throw it in the waist and do like a half hitch to kind of help tuck it up and out of the way clean. Same with the leg loops. And again, nothing in the pockets that could jab or cause an injury when the harness is loaded and presses against the leg itself. Again, clip-in point, centered and oriented with the body of the climber, and I'll have Greg turn around and double check that his clip-in loop is through the waist webbing of the swami and also in the oriented straight up and down in his back. Go ahead and turn around again, please, Greg. Now the clip-in point, I do want to take this time and talk about some attachment methods. Again, we utilize steel carabiners. Here's one by Blue Water. There's a lot of brands out there. Kong, Stubai makes a lot of good steel carabiners. But you can either go one carabiner into the harness, and since we work with steel here, we're okay with that, but there is a chance of this barrel unlocking and rubbing open. So on manual carabiners, we recommend the use of two of them, opposite and opposed. That way, if one gate was to open by accident, the other gate would still be locked and closed. Now, if you find this application too cumbersome, you can replace both of those with one auto-lock double steel carabiner, where the gate has to be pressed up and rotated open, and then hook right into the harness. That way it can't rub and open accidentally. It has to be a manual and concise movement to get that carabiner to open. Okay, what I want to do here now is show you a close-up of the harness so you can get a little bit better visual. Now here on the waist harness, also the swami portion of the harness itself, it's up above the hip bone. And again, we have the warning label, so I'm going to have Paul go ahead and double back or triple back his harness to lock off and cover up that warning label. Second, I'm going to have him go ahead and do his right leg. And also, you want to make sure they don't have any kind of knives, pens, coins, or any kind of objects in their pant pocket that the harness was loaded on that. He'll go ahead and jam it into their leg and cause an injury. He's going to go ahead and cover up the warning label on the left leg as well. And again, now as an instructor, I want to make sure that harness is on there nice and snug. Usually 2-finger test is what we use as a rule. It should be snug, but not very sloppy. Check the legs. And again, his shirt and all is tucked in, so his harness isn't being obstructing the front for clip-in. And I want him to go ahead and just turn around. I just want to make sure that the clip-in ring is right in the center of his lower back. Before we put anybody up in the air, we need to talk about the safety equipment we're going to use while keeping them in the air safe. Now over here on Paul, we have a typical ropes course harness. It's a swami belt construction that rides up above the hip bone, followed by 2 leg loops. And on this particular harness, it's important that the buckles themselves be triple back through to lock them off and keep them from slipping. On this particular brand, it even comes with a nice fancy warning label, which indicates we need to go ahead and back up the tail of this harness. It's got a nice clip-in or tie-in point at the front of the harness. which is a high clipping point, giving Paul here a low center of gravity. So if on a ropes course he falls, he ends up in a sitting upright position. Also behind Paul is a loop here, which you can also use for an additional person to hang onto it for ballast, to hold the belayer down, or to tie off to a tree and provide some additional support and anchoring. Thanks, Paul. Now this particular harness, just yet another brand, it's got pre-sewn and double back buckles that cinch and adjust tightly by themselves. So once it's on the body, again, make sure it's up above the hip bone, and again, you want the swami part of the harness above the hip bone, so if the participant is to invert and go upside down, obviously you don't want them to slip out of the harness. You have extra tail here, you're just going ahead and put an overhand knot to kind of tie it up, tie it out of the way. And this harness too has a high clipping point or a tie-in point, so again, if Barb here was to fall, she's going to end in an upright position. Some of the more commercial harnesses on the market today might have a lower clip-in point, and if a participant was to fall and who's uncertain about themselves in the air, they might get a little bit panicked in the fact that they fall horizontally or have a tendency to invert. So we recommend a harness that's going to have a high clip-in point. In addition to the backside of Barbara's harness, we've also got another loop, and on this particular manufacturer, they actually rate that loop and you can actually belay off of it as well. Now one of the things that Barbara's demonstrating here is that if people put on a harness and it's kind of cold and brisk, you want to go ahead and tuck any kind of baggy clothing inside the harness. All that's going to do is allow you as a belayer to be able to visually see the clip-in point and make sure that our sweatshirt doesn't get tangled and cause any problems while up in the air. Now, whenever I approach a climber, there's a 4H check I want to do. The first H is standing for I want her helmet on her head, and it's about a finger or two off her eyebrow, fitting nice and squarely, not off to a side, and it's not too sloppy, it's on there kind of firm. And the chin strap itself just holds the helmet in place. It doesn't want to choke her or restrict her from talking or breathing. So that was the H. The second H is the harness, so we have helmet and harness. Then as we attach her to a belay rope, and I'll have one swing in here, the third H is going to stand for her hardware. So we've got an auto double locking steel carabiner here, and we recommend a steel carabiner. Some programs use aluminum, that's fine, but it needs to be rated at least 5,000 pounds or stronger. So we take our hardware, click it into our harness. We're using a figure 8 on a bite with a double overhand backup knot in this application. So we've got the harness, the hardware, so the helmet, the harness, the hardware is clipped in, and then the heart. We also promote you to use a challenge by choice philosophy. Barb, you want to go ahead and try this today?
I am ready.
All right, she's ready to go. Now I'm going to have the belayer kind of fade in here to the picture and talk a little bit about some other pre-climb checks that go with the belayer themselves. So if Barbara's here had the 4 H's, the helmet, harness, hardware, heart, Greg here, our belayer, is going to have a safe check, S-A-F-E. As a belayer, he wants to have a good bomber, sturdy stance. That's your S. The A is going to be his anchoring device at his harness and also the shear reduction block and the belay cable overhead. The F is to make sure his friction device is threaded correctly. And his E, finally, is his equipment, making sure his carabiner's locked and his harness is on correctly and backed up if necessary. So between your 4H check on your climber and your safe check on your belayer, you're pretty much ready to go. Now the more common commands for belaying would be started from the climber, look at the belayer, and it would just be on belay. The belayer would respond, belay is on. Barbara would say climbing, and Greg would say climb on. We don't necessarily recommend you have to use that words, but whatever programmatic words you put in your manual, please be consistent and use those thoroughly throughout your day.
Okay, we're going to do a few safety checks before we begin our climb, okay? And our first safety check is going to be the 4H check. And I'm going to do that on you. So what I'm going to check for is your helmet. It's the first H. Make sure it's secure, stable. Next we're going to do harness. Make sure all the buckles are secure. Next, we're going to do a hardware check, which is your carabiner. Can you show me that it's locked? And the last is the heart. Do you want to do this today?
Yes, I do.
Good. It's a lot of fun. Now I'm going to do a safe check. Okay? So I'm going to get in the proper stance. I'm going to bend my legs. Anchor is next, so I look up, make sure my anchor is stable. Friction. Make sure I have plenty of friction in my belay device. And the next, last but not least, is the equipment, which is my carabiner. Do a lock, and then check my harness. Make sure all the buckles are secure. And then we are ready to climb. Do you know the first command?
On belay?
And when I'm ready, I would say, belay is on.
Climbing?
Climb on.
Ladder spotter? Climbing.
Now we're going to simulate as if the belayer got his shirt snagged in the friction device and he's unable to lower the participant to the ground and needs to have another belayer come in and do an escape for the friction device to be cleared out.
Give you a hand here.
Yeah. Thank you.
Check. Okay, ready to transfer?
Yep.
Now the belayer can remove the carabiner and the friction device, unclear it from his shirt, his jacket, friendship bracelet, hair, whatever it might become entangled. Now he'll reassemble the belay system.
Belay is on.
Alright, ready to transfer?
Yes. Lowering. You set?
Set.
Belay is off.
Alright.
Look what I can do! Look what I can do!